This computer. Hello, everybody, and welcome to yet another edition of For Those Who Believe, this wonderful podcast connecting us sons and daughters from all over the world. And I'm delighted, really, really thrilled today to have you, Sylvain Prevost, all the way from Ottawa, just going to show that the Casa children are everywhere. The sons and daughters are all over the planet, and we're connected by one common bond, the God consciousness that we experienced at the Casa, and it's still going strong there. And you've been there since the medium left the Casa, and we always like to thank Joao de Diaz for bringing us together because without him saying yes to his mission, we wouldn't be having this conversation and we would never have met for sure. And I'm just so grateful that people are relaying their stories so openly and so truthfully, and people are resonating so much with all of the stories that we have from the Casa and how we got there and what we learned. So you take it away there, Sylvain, and I'm excited that we're going to hear your story.
Well, you asked at the beginning how I heard about the Casa, how it entered my life, and it's a strange tale. I had a very difficult adolescence and very chaotic sort of teenage period in my life, and I sort of went down a lot of wrong paths and sort of did a lot of harm to myself actually inadvertently as a result. So by the time I was at the end of my teens, I was quite a mess, psychologically and physically actually. I damaged my ability to play guitar. I was a really amazing musician, and also singing damaged my voice. So I was very disturbed by that, and also just a mess. So I discovered this medium that was about an hour away from Ottawa. His name was Mr. Dale, and he helped me for many, many years. He never charged me a penny, and he accepted donations, but he never charged me a penny. He always said, the real people don't charge. That's what he told
Mm.
me. And he gave me a lot of lessons because he would work on me. He had this way of like he would put his hand on your hand, and he would you would feel this energy go up your arm into the area that he was checking, and he would tell you what's wrong, like what the problem is, and then he would work on it. It was quite remarkable. And then he would talk to you while the energy kind of flowed. It would take about 20 minutes or so. And he talked to me over time about reincarnation, about all kinds of interesting things that I was really not familiar with. And so that opened my mind, sort of prepared me in a way to discover more about the spirit realm,
Mhm.
which of course the Casa is steeped in. And
Yes.
and so that was in 1994 when I met him. And then by 2004, it had been 10 years that I'd been seeing him. I was in university, and he had helped me a lot, actually. He had healed a lot of my ability to play guitar. It wasn't 100%, but it was a lot better than it was in 94. Let's put it that way. And but I sought, I still had some issues. Like I had one issue where my joint in my jaw was busted, and I couldn't open my mouth more than like a finger between my teeth. It was really,
Oh,
really annoying me, among other things. And we just couldn't close the deal on that because he could only work on me either through a photo or by me going to see him. And I couldn't send a photo more than once a week, and I couldn't go see him more than once in a while because I didn't even have a car at the time. And so anyway, it was interesting. I sort of one day figured, well, he exists, so that means there are other people that must exist like him, and maybe there's somebody around in the world that works differently or has more power or whatever. I mean, I wasn't totally sure what I was looking for, but I was just looking around one day. And at this point in 2004, the internet was kind of a thing, a bigger thing than it was in the previous 10 years. And Google was also a thing at this point. There had been
mhm.
search engines before, but Google was like a pretty big one. As you know, it became the dominant one really in
Mhm.
internet history. And so I got on Google one night, and I think it was the winter of 2004. And I just, all I did was I typed a search in the Google search bar, something like greatest healer in the world. I just wanted to see, Is there anybody out there that's, because it's hard to find these people, right? Medium Joao or whoever, Mr. Dale, Reginaldo, all these characters in the world. How the hell do you find these people? It's usually by word of mouth. It's not
Yeah.
really, they don't put ads. They don't have TV
Yeah.
commercials, that because they're not charging, right? It's not a business, right? So you can't find them like you would an auto mechanic or a dentist. So
Mm.
so it was very difficult, So I did that search, greatest healer in the world, and in 2004, when I was still in university, and the only thing that popped up was this place in Brazil, this place called the Casa Dominacio. Of course, at the time I didn't speak Portuguese. I do now, of course, but at the time it was all very alien to me. I figured this was like in the middle of the jungle somewhere.
Mm.
How the hell am I going to get down there? I was only, 2004, I was like, what, 29 years old. I
Yeah.
didn't have all that much money. I was still a student. So I was like, I put it off in my mind. I just said, well, maybe that's real. Maybe it's a real place. Maybe it's somewhere I'm going to go one day, but I can't go right now because I gotta finish school. It's a big deal going down there. It's a big project, It was a big deal for me at the time. So I waited until I finished university in
Mm.
2006. And I finally graduated in 2006. And I had met a girl called Michelle at the time, and I told her about this place in Brazil that I was intending to go, and it was, a bit strange, and I didn't know much about it. I knew there was this guy. He was called John of God at the time, that was the English title that he had. And
Mm.
I didn't know how anything worked. I just said I got to go down there and see about this thing and see if it can help. At the very least, open my mouth because I was really getting tired of this thing. Because the dentist and all that, they couldn't fix it, or they said, well, there's operations for that, but you could actually end up worse with that. And it just one theme in my life that led me to spiritual healing is the fact that I really encountered in many, many cases, like the problem with guitar playing when I was young and all the things that happened in my life, I abutted against the limits of medical knowledge, the limits
Mm.
of human science, human medical understanding, the
Mm.
limits of medicine, basically, and how many times in my life I would have a problem and the doctor would say, well, we don't really understand that problem, and it's tricky, and trying to fix it could actually make it worse, and or we
Wow.
can't fix it, or maybe you should just live with it, or maybe
Wow.
some variation of all that. Okay. and
Yeah.
uh, and I just kind of sought in my mind, I don't know, well, I now have an idea why that is, but I always had this idea in my head that there's something more, there's another way to seek healing outside of the human limitations of our current civilization. So that's how I sought out Mr. Dale in '94, and that's how I sought out the Casa in 2004, and then finally in 2006, in at the very end of September. Actually, by the time I arrived in Abidjan for the first time, it was October 1st, 2006.
Wow.
And I traveled all the way down there by myself. I didn't speak Portuguese. I didn't know anything about Brazil. I really, was a very green person there. So I
Mm.
get out and I land. It's funny because I took this slightly unusual route because I had read, there was this blog, Friends of the Casa at the time.
I
There's a
remember.
website, and there was all kinds of information there, and that's how I discovered Adrienne. And anyway, so I ended up flying down there. It was a very long flight because I flew actually not just to Brasilia, but I took an extra flight all the way to Goiânia because I
Oh
heard that
yeah.
the bus ride was shorter from Goiânia than Brasilia. The problem
Mm.
is, if you factor in the extra flight, it really comes to the same thing. So
Yeah.
you're
I
better
know you
off.
didn't know, right? So
Yeah, I didn't know. It was my first time, And so anyway, so I flew all the way down there. It was like 30 plus hours, and I can't sleep on planes because I'm just too tall, I'm only 6 foot, but 6 foot is still too tall to sleep
yeah.
comfortably in a. So anyway, I get off the bus from Goiânia to Abidjan. So my first arrival in Abidjan was October 1st, 2006. It was raining. The rainy season had begun. And I
Hmm.
get out of the bus, and of course, I didn't have an umbrella with me because I didn't know anything about that at the time. I didn't know the importance of an umbrella in terms of protecting against the sun after an operation. Of course, I didn't know anything about anything. I had the Casa guide. I printed this guide that you could print back then off the Friends of the Casa website. So I had that, and I understand, certain vague things about triangles and operations and lines and all the weird stuff that you first encounter when you get to the Casa. It all sounds very strange. And posadas, I'd already reserved a place at Posada Catarinense, which
Me
is now, of
too.
course, doesn't exist anymore, but the building's still there, the property's still there. Anyway, so the first thing I did was I went to this place, which of course I now know as Bastos, which is on the other side of the highway, the Rodovia. And I asked the word for umbrella because I was like, I need like, I don't have one of those things that, protects. And that was the first Portuguese word I ever learned was guarda-chuvas.
Yeah.
That was
Wow.
so that's the first word I ever learned in Portuguese. I didn't have
Yeah.
one. But she did tell me to go down the street, to the Casa. She guided me which street to go on. At the time, there was a little public phone at the end of that street there that leads to the Casa. This is back in 2006.
Mm-hmm.
So I wandered
Okay.
down the street for the very first time. It was a light rain. I was pretty tired. I'd been up for over 30 hours, traveling. And the first stop I stopped into, of course, it was on a Monday, so everything was kind of quiet. And the first stop I stopped into was your cafe. It was Cafe Central. Of course,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
wasn't open. It was in the afternoon. It wasn't open yet, but
Don't
but
know until 6.
it provided a shelter. You know,
Right.
it wasn't open for
Okay.
the day. It was existing. The place was going to open later that day, I assume,
Yeah, we just built it the year before.
but it was a shelter for me. That was the first shelter I had. It was Cafe Central on that road leading to the
Ah,
Casa. And I rested there for a bit, kind of took stock of my situation, and I kept going. And at the time, of course, there was this huge field right next to the Cafe Central. Nothing had been built there, and Fruities was being renovated. They were building the second level of Fruities.
wow.
This was again October of 2006. So I walked across the field. You could just walk across. There was like this path to Posada Catarinense, and I checked in to this place, and it was full of people. It was full of characters, and that was my first arrival in Abidjan. And I started reading the book again, the guide, because I was going to go to orientation on a Tuesday evening at the Casa. There was orientation in those days. I think there still it is. I'm not sure, but there
No.
was there was back then anyway. I
Yeah,
forget
I
who it is
remember.
that did. I think the guy that did the orientation at the time was Diego, I believe. Might have been
Yeah,
Diego.
he did it for a long time.
So I went there for orientation, and of course, it was all very strange. I was open to things because I'd met Mr. Dale, and he had talked to me about, the spirit world and reincarnation and all these things that are kind of related to the Casa. And
Hmm.
but I didn't know anything. I went with the attitude of like, maybe it's real, maybe it's not, but we'll find out. I'm open to whatever may happen. That's the only. I wasn't like a hardcore, believer. I wasn't like a skeptic. I was kind of in the middle there. I was just like, let's see what happens because I need help. I mean, I need to open my mouth again, among other things. And so I basically started the process. I went to the orientation, and then on Wednesday morning, I went to the Primera Vez line,
First
dressed in
time,
white, dressed in white. I remember it was a chilly morning. I remember that. It was kind of cool in the morning, even though it was October.
right.
Um, So I wandered over there and I went to the first time line, and I went to get my translation done by a wonderful gentleman whose name I don't remember anymore, but he wasn't there in the subsequent years, but he was there that first time. A very nice, friendly guy, and he translated my request. And I went to the first time line and I saw the entity for the first time. It was quite an interesting experience. Of course, I didn't speak Portuguese, so I gave my note to the person that was translating, and then the guy just said something like "operation this afternoon" or something like that. Bye bye. So I went out,
Straight away.
got my blessing at the last current room or the last room, and then I
Mhm.
wandered off to get the soup for the first time. That was my first soup as well.
Excellent.
And it was the old kitchen, like the old soup kitchen, like the narrow little place there close to the
Yeah.
Casa. You know
Wow.
that, right?
Lining up. Yeah, lining up. It was
They
interesting.
they hadn't opened up that whole, they hadn't expanded anything. Like it was really,
Mhm.
the old
Small.
bathrooms.
The castle was very small.
It was pretty small in 2006, it was, but even though it had been operating for some time by that point, it
Yeah.
was still sort of developing into what it would become in the next 10 years,
Mhm.
And so anyway, so I had my operation in the afternoon. I didn't feel anything too much. It was almost like a little breeze on my face, but it could have been the breeze. I wasn't sure. So I went to my room back to the Pusada, and I rested. I tried to rest for 24 hours. That was actually a challenge because there's a lot of challenges really, but that was the first challenge. Staying in bed for 24 hours. I was like, wow, can I do that? Like that's really weird. And then it
Yeah.
was all these rules and regulations, and I was kind of, I thought that was very challenging as well. I stayed in bed, I think, 19 hours. I didn't make it 24,
Yeah.
but the Posada Catarinense had this area where you could lie in a hammock outside, a little gazebo thing that they had, still there, I think. Anyway,
Yeah.
and I laid in the hammock for the last few hours of my 24 hours. I didn't have an umbrella to hide from the sun. I didn't really know anything about that, but I knew the regulation. But I was like, well, I'll just try to minimize my exposure to the sun. And started taking the passiflora for the first time. That was the first time I started doing that. And I didn't really notice anything that first week. And at the time, you could go back to the current 2 days after your operation. So if I had my operation on the Wednesday, I could have technically gone back on the Friday. But I had this idea that sitting in the current would be extremely boring. Like I was like, what am I gonna? I wasn't familiar with meditation. I wasn't,
Mhm.
and back then, of course, you had to stay. It was way beyond 2 hours. It was sometimes 4 hours because you had to stay until the people in the line had all passed, until the
Yeah.
session was over. So this
Six
could drag on
rounds.
for 4 or 5, even 6 hours, depending how busy it
Mhm.
was. I said, how am I going to do that? So I avoided that like the plague. So I didn't go to the current that first week. In fact, I didn't really intend to go in the current at all. I figured, well, that's just for mediums anyway. Of course, I didn't understand that we're all mediums. There's a lot of
Yes,
things I didn't
yeah.
know. A lot of things I
Oh,
didn't know. So the second week, I was there for 2 weeks. So the second week, I go for revision on the Wednesday. And the first thing the entity tells me is sit in my current. Because I've been
oh,
avoiding this. I've been avoiding this, and I needed to. I realize now I needed to sit in the current to trigger the work. I didn't know that.
yes.
I didn't know any of that at the time.
Very
So,
important.
so I sat in the rest of the session. I sat the rest of that session in the afternoon of the second Wednesday in the current, in the second room, the entities room, as it was called at the time. And I didn't feel a damn thing. And the second, you have to sit a second time as well when he tells you that. So I went the next morning and on a Thursday morning, and I sat in the current again, and I still didn't feel anything. And I was writing back to my girlfriend on, they had these little, at the time, all the shops existed, in Abidjan. It was pretty lively. Uh, and you could go to the internet cafe there on the street, one of them, and you could use the computer and write back home. I didn't have a phone at the time. I didn't have computer with me. So I wrote back to my girlfriend saying, well, it was an interesting experience, but I don't think it's going to work for me. Like I did everything. I think I did everything I had to do. And it's Thursday and this is like the second week and I'm leaving, this weekend and doesn't look like it's going to work out. So that was my message to her on the Thursday around noon or so. And I skipped the afternoon session. I thought, we're basically done.
Yeah,
Because I wake up every morning and I'd be like, can I open my mouth? No. Okay, well, this is not working. So we get
instant
to
fix.
Friday the 13th of October, 2006. So this was the last Friday I was going to be in Abidjan. I was leaving on the Sunday, I believe, or something like that. And I was intending to, I had a book with me at the time. I had this book, Herodotus. It's an ancient Greek history book written by an ancient Greek back in the 5th century BC. And I was a classics major in university. So this was kind of like the stuff I did. I was reading this book in the hammock, and I would spend my whole days just reading this book, waiting for my mouth to magically open. which wasn't happening. And I was just finishing lunch in the dining area at the posada, and this lady who has since passed away, and I never really remembered her name. You might remember her. She was a German lady, uh, living in Abidjan for many years. She had dogs. She would walk around with her dogs. She was an older lady in her
Mm.
60s, maybe at the time. Anyway, she came up to me in the dining area. I didn't know her at all. And she came right up to me and she said, in this kind of authoritarian German accent, she says, I always see you in the hammock reading this book.
Oh
Why
my
you read
God.
this book? Go
Really?
to cover now. Put the book away. And
Wow.
I was like, what the hell? I mean, why would she care what the hell I'm doing with my life? She doesn't know me at all. We've never spoken. I've seen her
Yeah,
walking around town, you know, but I felt an intuition told me that that was actually someone else that was telling me that was using
exactly.
her as a vessel to order me,
Yes.
quite strictly order me to the current. So I
Yeah.
just said, okay. And she went off and I went to my room. I threw the book in my room. I changed into my white clothes and I went for the last current session that I could participate in during that first visit. And I
Mhm.
sat in the first current room for the first time of my own volition, although I kind
Yeah.
of had been ordered to go there. But I sat there and the session was starting to, people on the stage were talking and, lots of people. It was pretty packed at the time. And there was a guide lady in the front there. I forget her name as well. It wasn't you. It was this other lady. She was, I think,
Tanya.
Brazilian. She was Brazilian.
Tanya,
And
yeah.
she had this little way of speaking. She was like, I want you
Yeah.
to visualize the
Yeah.
wonderful waterfall falling down with the
Tanya.
colors. Anyway,
She
so
lovely.
she was kind of guiding us. And I closed my eyes and I told myself, well, you know, by doing this, no one can say I didn't try everything because this is the one thing I hadn't done yet is come to the current myself, sit in the first
Mhm.
current room and intend to stay as long as it takes. I want to be able to say I tried all the different things. I had a crystal bed. I'd done all kinds of things. I drank the blessed water. I had the pills. At the time, it
The
was 3 pills.
waterfall. Did you go to the
Yeah,
waterfall?
I
Yeah.
hadn't gone to the waterfall yet. That was to come. I was going to do that in that weekend.
Yeah.
But I was doing everything I thought I could, and I'd written it off pretty much by that point. But I figured, I'll give it this last shot, whatever, see what happens. And that's when they nailed me. That's when they got me. So 20 minutes into the session, I'm sitting there, and my eyes were closed, and I'm just, trying to sit properly with my hands, like this, and all of a sudden, I feel this extremely clear, undeniable, very strong force start to enter my face. Like it was like this invisible force going into my face. And it was almost like somebody was standing behind me with their hands penetrating my face and actually my mouth open,
Wow.
pushing my mouth open. And pushing the disc that was blocking the jaw from opening backwards into place. And I start to flip out because I had tried to force my mouth open in the past, in the previous 10 years when I'd had this problem for 10 years. And whenever I tried doing that, I just ended up hurting myself because the disc just was blocking and then I would just tear the ligaments and it was just, it would always end up bad. So I thought I can't do this. But I wasn't doing it. Something else was opening my mouth. And then I hear in my head, it wasn't in my ear, it was like in my mind, something like, it's about time you come here. And then I heard push, 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 push. So I guess they wanted me to push with them because they didn't want to just drag my mouth open themselves. They wanted me to push with them to push because there was a lot of resistance. I hadn't
Yeah.
opened my mouth in 10 years. And so this went on for the entire current session. So we're talking like maybe 3 hours or something like that. Push, push,
Minimum.
push. And then I would hear continuously in my mind, push, 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 and then relax, 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 push, 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 relax, relax, relax. And then after about 3 hours, I could open my mouth with two fingers between my teeth for the first
What?
time in 10,
Wow.
for 10 years. No,
That's
don't worry
amazing.
about that. That's my phone ringing. It's gonna pass. Anyway,
Yeah.
um, So basically, that was my first encounter with the incorporeal world. Uh,
Yes.
it totally blew my mind. It changed my life ever since because, I mean, you can have a lot of experiences in life, but having a physical encounter with spirits that are physically moving you and doing something very powerful on your body for hours at a time,
Yeah,
that really leaves an impression. Okay. And that
exactly.
left a very, very distinct. So anyway, I walked out of that session and at the end, at that time, you could go into this line called the bye-bye line when you were leaving uh, Abidjania that week on the
Yeah.
Friday afternoon. There was this bye-bye line, and at the time they allowed even people in the current to jump out of
That's,
current and go
yeah,
into the
they
light.
only called it from the current. Yeah.
And so I jumped out at the last minute. I thought I wasn't going to go because I was afraid that if I stopped doing this thing with these invisible people, maybe that's going to be it. And I didn't know if we were done yet. So I did jump out at the end and I went to the medium. I was the last person in the line and I fell on my knees and I grabbed his hand. And I said, thank you so much. Of course, I had the translator. Thank you so much for everything that's happened today. And do I need to come back? And he looked down at me and he said in Portuguese, "You'll be back."
Excellent.
And he was right because I did come back quite a lot. But
You sure
then I
did. You
spoke.
were back a lot of times. You came back.
Yeah,
How many? You lost count, maybe.
it was well over 10, well over
I
10 times
remember.
over the next, decade or so, or even as recently as 2024.
Yeah, you were
But
there
anyway,
when in yeah, at the beginning, and then you were also there when the medium wasn't there, which
yeah, I
we
mean,
can
I,
talk
I
about
wasn't
later.
there like in the absolute beginning. I never went in the 70s or 80s or even the 90s. But I was there a couple of years after you first got there, really. So I'm kind of an old timer. I'm a veteran, you know.
Definitely, yes. Well, we
So
always love
after
to see you.
Yeah, so after stumbling out of the casa and talking to the entity there, I went to the bathroom and I looked in the mirror, and for the first time in 10 years, you know, I was like this. I
Oh,
was like
that's
opening my
amazing.
mouth, and I was like, my God, it's real. And there was no pain. There was no pain. So I wandered into the lookout, that area in the back of the casa, the lookout, where look upon this huge expanse of savanna all the way as far as the eye could see. It's to the horizon.
Beautiful.
And there was this man there, an Australian or New Zealand man, who was there for cancer, and I sort of befriended him in the 2 weeks that I was there, and I obviously had a look on my face like I had an epiphany, which is exactly what he told me. He's like, "My friend, you look like you've had an epiphany."
Yeah.
And I looked at him, and of course, this was right after this whole thing had happened, and I looked at him and I said, "Don't you get it, man? It's all real. There are invisible people walking around.
Yeah.
It's real. The whole thing is real."
Amazing. Yeah.
And he said, "Welcome to the club." And he said, "If you want to understand a bit more about what's happened here," and then he recommended to me the Spirits book. And
Yes.
that's how I got
Alan
introduced.
Kardec.
Yeah, that's how I got introduced to Spiritism, and I became a Spiritist actually in the subsequent months. I devoured that book online. I didn't have it physically, but I devoured it online. You could read it online for free. And I read the questions and answers specifically. I just started with question number one. I skipped the introduction. I just went straight to question number one about God, and then I went all the way through. I
Wow.
devoured that, and I became a Spiritist pretty much instantly at that point.
Yeah.
It's the most sensible explanation I ever encountered in terms of how things work in the bigger picture, and
Yeah, me too.
and
The brilliant books.
it explained the Casa very well. It explained a lot of things that were going on and reincarnation and all of the whole thing.
Mhm.
So that was my first visit. So I went to the waterfall that weekend before leaving Abidjania, and that was interesting. I took a whole shower in the waterfall because it was cold. It was mid October. The bugs had come out of the ground. There was beetles everywhere. There was ants the size of your little finger with wings, or termites, I should say. Uh, you
Yeah.
know, Mid October there, it just gets totally wild. The bugs, the
Yeah.
tarantulas. I mean, it
Oh
was
yeah,
crazy, crazy. Praying
wildlife.
mantis, the size of your hand, cicadas
Right,
with that whistle thing that they do until they blow up or whatever, like just totally wild.
great
Moths,
stuff.
moths the size of your hand. I mean, just anyway, it was wild. So I went to the waterfall, took a full shower, and then I hitchhiked. I was really trying to live cheap at the time. I was a pretty experienced traveler. I'd been to Europe and backpacked and stuff, so I figured I'll just backpack back to Goiânia and then get on my plane. And I missed the buses kept not picking me up. I guess they were full, so I got a ride with just some guy that was just willing to give me a ride. He was one of those
Great.
informal taxi drivers,
Yeah,
and I paid him, really next to nothing. I think it was 20 or 30 reais. He asked for 5 reais, but I paid him 30 because, what the hell?
yeah.
And he brought me to Goiânia and I flew back. And that was my first. Oh, the thing is, though, I should mention the work that had happened in the current kept going. So when I got back to my posada, I went to bed that night. I took my third pill, and they jumped on me again that night, and we went for another 3 hours in my bed at them. So now I knew that they were following me around, and I could work with them outside of the current. You know.
Sure.
So that
Yeah.
was insane. I was like, what? So I mean, and this kept going once I got home. Like I remember I was back at work at the
But
office and they would try to open my mouth, while I'm sitting at the computer at work.
I mean,
So
it's great.
it was
They
it
never
was
leave you alone. They really take you under their wing when they adopt you.
But that's when I realized another thing, which would become a theme for working with them. So I'm one of those people. I'm not the only one, and I'm sure maybe I don't think I'm the only one you've heard about that can work with them in this fashion. There are other people I've heard that have this similar type of hands-on experience with the spirits of the
Yes,
casa.
a lot.
It's not that common, but it is not. I'm not the only one, and so one of the themes of working with them in this fashion or the way that they work with me is that I cannot communicate with them for some reason, for whatever reason, I can't communicate with them. So I always have to kind of figure out my way of working with them in a process of trial and error.
Right.
And sometimes it's relatively straightforward, and sometimes it's actually quite tricky and even actually dangerous. I've hurt myself a number of times working with them because of the fact that I don't really know what my part's supposed to be. And sometimes your part is very important when you're working on different things. Uh,
Yes.
it's a minority of things that were really tough, but those things were pretty significant. So I learned that pretty fast once I got home in 2006. I realized I don't really know what I'm doing. They're trying to work with me. I ended up actually losing a job because I couldn't concentrate because they kept trying to work on me while I was trying to do my work, and it was very distracting.
Mm.
So eventually I ran out of pills. I ran out of Passiflora by December of that year. And then I encountered the very tricky notion of trying to get pills sent to you at the
Oh,
time.
yes.
And I
Yes.
got Adrienne, this lady, Adrienne Gerson, to help me with that. And I encountered the difficulties of that because the first batch she sent to me got stopped at the border because I guess the border people didn't know what the hell these pills were. And it got stopped a second time. And it took 3 attempts to finally get the package through. And by this time, it was like late May of 2007. So
Wow.
quite a long time later. I had pretty much stopped working with them at this point because I figured I don't have any pills, and I thought, you need the pills. I realized at some point throughout the past many years that I don't strictly need the pills, but they are important.
They help
Uh,
for
yeah,
sure.
to work with
Yeah.
them. Anyway, as soon as I took that first pill, after months and months of not having them, they jumped on me immediately, and they were ready to go right away, as if nothing had happened. And I realized at this point, well, I can't really work with them while I'm working because they're going to try to work on me while I'm at the office, and that's just not going to work. I'm going to end up losing my job again. So I kind of sort of didn't start taking the pills right away. I said, I'm going to wait until the end of summer and I'm going to go on leave so I can dedicate myself full time to this and actually finish this whatever we're trying to do here with my job because we had it open, but they still had stuff to do, and I didn't really understand. Maybe it was rebalancing stuff because I hadn't opened my mouth in so long. There was a lot of stuff going on there. So
Oh,
I waited until the end of August, early September of 2007, and I sort of ended my contract that I was working, and I went on leave. And I said, I'm going to stay on leave until I finish this work because I want to finish this because I have other stuff I want them to work on after that. I'm going to go back there. I'm going to ask for more stuff. So I started working with them, and a month went by, 2 months went by. Now we're like mid-November of 2007, and I'm working every day, and it was like 2 hours per pill, 3 pills a day. We're talking 6 hours a day, 7 days a week, sitting in my chair, opening my mouth and closing it and doing all these
Oh
things
my
with.
God.
And I started wondering, like, my God, is this going to end? Like, are we getting anywhere? Am I doing things correctly? Am I not doing things correctly? And that's when the second amazing thing happened, which was my girlfriend at the time, Michelle. Uh, I'd been with her for about a year and a half by that point, and she had mentioned to me when I met her, she had been on antidepressants because she had an anxiety problem, panic attacks, and stuff like that. And I had brought her to Mr. Dale, and he had helped her, and then she started got off those pills. And that fall in 2007, she started telling me just casually while we were hanging out that her abilities were coming back now that she was off the pills. I said, "What abilities?" And she said, "Well, I used to have the ability to see and hear spirits." I said, "You never told me that." I said, "Well, because
Yeah.
it went away while I was on those pills. But now that I'm off those pills, I find it's coming back." And so one day while I was trying to sitting in my place working, and she lived very close to me. We were both downtown in Ottawa here. And at one point, I was trying to figure out how to finish this work with the spirits because it was like November at this point. And I said, I wonder if I could maybe, if I could just talk to them. That would be so useful, you know. And then I thought, well, Michelle did say that she had this ability. So I gave her a call. I stopped my session for the night or whatever. And I gave her a call and I said, Michelle, you said this thing about these abilities you have. You don't think you could act as, and I think I said something like, could you act as a kind of transceiver for these spirits so that I can actually just talk to them to find out like what's up? Am I doing things okay? Are we get almost done? I just
Mm.
wanted to touch base with them. And she said, well, there's no way I could do that over the phone. And then she just stopped and she said, you should come over. So I walked over to her place and she
Mhm.
said her tongue was tingling. And she said, I got to lie down. She lay down. I sat next to her. She completely passed out. And they started talking to me through her.
Wow, that's
She was
amazing.
incorporating a what turned out to be a messenger because my actual spirit doctors could not incorporate inside of her because their vibration was too high for her.
Hmm.
She would get screwed up. So they got this little smaller spirit or lower level spirit to incorporate inside of her and then act as a speaker. And the
Wow.
words just came out like a torrent. Like it was like there was no punctuation. It was just like, this avalanche of words, but it was a message, a very clear message. And they told me
Wow.
what I was doing right, what I was doing wrong, what I needed to do, and what how long it would take if I did everything they told me to finish the work on my job. And basically what they said was, you're finishing exactly at 2 hours every time. That's not good because then we have to play catch up after to try to get back to where we were. And you need to let us let you know when we're done with each
Okay.
session because we have a plan what we're doing here. It's like we're like doctors. I mean, we're doctors. We have a plan. So you're kind of screwing us up. They didn't use the word screwing up, but I forget the exact words, but it was something like that.
Yeah.
And if you do what we're telling you, the work will take less and less time. At first, it's going to take a lot of time, but eventually the sessions will get shorter and shorter until it's literally going to be a few seconds. And you'll even be able to take one pill after the other. You won't have to wait a couple hours between pills, but that's later on. But if you do all of that, and you can continue to talk with us on a regular basis to keep things on track. But if you do everything we're telling you, we'll be done in about 2 months.
Okay, good.
And then she woke up and she was freezing. She was just freezing. She wasn't
Mm-hmm.
cold to the touch, but she was cold inside. I guess because it had drained a lot of her energy to incorporate the messenger spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And this was the first time she'd ever done that. So she had no consciousness of what had happened. She said, "Did something happen?" I said, "Michelle, did something happen? You're a
Yeah.
medium. you incorporated a messenger. Like I was, of course, I was as blown away by that as I had been of the moment when they had opened my mouth in
Yes, of
October of
course.
2000, a year earlier. So I
Yeah.
did what they told me to do, and that began a 6 month period where I was able to talk with them once a week. I would sit and she got to the point where she didn't even have to incorporate. She could just get their responses in her mind and just tell me verbally what their
Wow.
response. So I mean, I can tell you, being able to communicate with them on a regular basis, that made a huge difference in terms of the work.
Exactly. Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
that's like having medium joie with you all the time. And, I mean, it was very, very, I became quite addicted actually to that element. Anyway, and
Brilliant.
sure enough, within 2 months, and how they would tell me they were done, that was very interesting. So the first session after that communication, I persisted well beyond 2 hours with them to just keep moving and opening my mouth and different angles. And eventually it's kind of slowed down. And then I felt something because I was sitting on the edge of my chair while I did this. And eventually I felt like almost like a hand on my chest pushed me back into the chair. And then I tried to
Mm.
sit up again and I tried to continue. And then I felt again. And it happened three
Yeah,
times. And that's
yeah,
how they would
always
tell me they were
does.
done. That was their way of telling me at the time.
It's
Three
always
times.
three. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's always three.
And so I did that, and eventually the sessions went from 4.5 hours to 3 to 2.5 to 1. And like they had told me, eventually it got down to like literally 30 seconds or even 15 seconds per session. Like they would just all I felt they were doing is they were just checking one side, checking the other, and then they would just push me back into the chair. And then I could take another pill right away, which is not technically, I know the rules normally say 4 hours between pills, but they had told me to do it this way. So I was just following their directions. And then they would just check and then they would push me back. And so I could finish my whole 3 pills in like less than 5 minutes, as opposed to hours and hours at the beginning. So it was quite a change. And then one day I took my second pill of the day. I remember it was January 25th, 2008 at this point. And I took my second pill and nothing happened for the first time in a year and a half. Absolutely nothing happened. I didn't feel anything in my face. I didn't feel any movement, nothing. And I felt something push me back. And then I heard in my head, done, 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 done,
Finally.
done. And
Yeah,
then I
you learn
called Michelle.
patience.
She was at work at this point, and I was still off work. And I called her and I said, I took my second pill, and she just cut me off and she said, they're done.
Yeah,
They're
she
done.
knew.
So that was my first sort of
Wow.
healing trajectory, if you will, healing project with the spirits. It took literally a year and a half, and
Wow.
it required them communicating with me through my girlfriend,
Amazing.
and we got it done. So that whole thing just blew me right away.
Of course it did. Yeah, because it's so unusual. It's
Yeah,
amazing, actually.
yeah. I don't know if anybody else has ever had that combination of experiences. I know other people have had the moving with them and feeling them, working on them. I've heard of that through a number of
Yeah.
people, but I don't know that I've ever heard of people having another medium acting as a communicator with their
Never.
spirit doctors.
Because the Casa always encouraged people to go back to talk to the entity themselves.
Yeah,
But you went back anyway.
I did go back.
And yeah, you went back many times after that. And every time you experience something different. I'm just looking at the time here. We've got 15 minutes. So
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, your experiences there were extraordinary. I remember meeting you on numerous occasions and you were like, oh my God, they're really working on me. I mean, you were really feeling them.
I think you
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 know,
saw me in the current sometimes doing all kinds of weird things, and you were like, "Wow, what the hell is this?"
I always let you at it. Whatever they were doing, they were moving you around a lot
Yeah,
and you were open to it. You were doing your 50%,
yeah,
or more.
oh yeah,
But they were really,
yeah,
really, it was obvious that you were being worked on and you were shining. By the end of each visit, you were always shining because I always
yeah,
saw you in the cafe and you were always different when you were leaving. Something had shifted every time. I
yeah.
remember
It
that
was
distinctly.
yeah, it was a difficult journey because, like I said, working with them in the way that I do, and especially after 6 months, I lost the ability to communicate with them. My girlfriend actually got quite ill because the incorporations were actually screwing up her spirit body. She had to come to Brazil, and they fixed her. and they cut her off completely in order to protect her from any future harm from
Yeah.
incorporating messengers. They realized that she couldn't handle it. So that I
Yeah.
lost that, and then that led to a lot of. But anyway, just to sum up the subsequent healing of significance, I eventually was diagnosed with MS, like your
Um,
sister.
yes,
I,
exactly. This
I
is
didn't
very
have
important.
I didn't have progressive MS. I had the relapse kind,
Yes.
but still, it's very serious. And
Terrible.
I went to ask for that in 2017 after I'd been diagnosed with it, and I got an operation for that among other things, and I ended up, like they sometimes tell you at the Casa, sometimes an operation can really open up the hood and really get in there, and it can actually cause a massive sort of attack actually at the beginning because
Crisis.
they're really
Yeah.
getting in there. And I ended up, as you might remember, I ended up in a wheelchair in
I
2017.
remember that very
Yeah,
well. Yes.
that was them beginning to work on my MS. And after about a month and a half or so, all symptoms had resolved, and I went back home. Sort of, I remember I was staying at Vando's place, and I remember as an example of how I was so much more better because I was so dizzy. That's what led me to the wheelchair. By a month and a half later, I was standing on one leg and saying, I'm off. I'm off back home. And so they stopped my MS in its tracks in 2017. Uh, And everybody's experience is different. I mean, I've known people with MS that it stopped the progression, but it didn't really cure them. Like our friend Ron, as you remember, Ron was
Yes.
there for years and years, and
He
and
just passed away recently.
I know, I know,
Yeah,
but he
we
was there
we
for
love him.
years. He had a pretty
Yeah.
serious case of MS as well.
He had the
Um,
same as my sister, but he survived much longer. I mean, she
exactly.
passed away in 2016.
And I remember at one point he told me at the time that he had gone to the entity because people were curious, like, why aren't you walking by now? You've been going to the Casa for so many years. And
Yeah.
he had asked the entity that, and the entity had answered to him, "Well, you're not getting worse, are you?"
Exactly.
And it's true, he wasn't getting worse, right? He was still
Yes.
kind of staying the same. But apparently, with him, it was a part of his life journey that he had to go through this. His karmic, of course, I've learned over the years about karma and about the arrangements we make before we incarnate and the things that
Yeah.
we have to go through, and it's extremely complicated and goes well beyond the range of this conversation. But all I can say is, as a result of my experiences with the Casa, and my encounter with Spiritism specifically, it
Mm.
really changed my whole outlook on existence, on life in this lifetime, and I'm grateful for that because it really gave me a perspective that I never would have had otherwise. I have no fear of death at all.
Yes,
Um,
me too.
that's worth a million just by itself.
You know,
Um,
I'm ready anytime.
Anytime, I'm 50. I'm turning 50 next week, and I have no problem with aging at all because it's really just in this body at this time, and I'm immortal. We're all immortal. So it doesn't really
Exactly.
matter. It's just a part of the very, very, very long journey all the way to the top. And the beauty about Spiritism is it teaches you that we're all going to end up at the top one day. Everybody wins
Isn't it
ultimately.
great? This is
It
a
might,
message of the Casa as well. You know, the Casa is works through Spiritism,
yeah,
which is a-religious. It's not about a religious belief system. It's about spirits. I
yeah.
mean, that's the beauty of the Casa. It was everyone was welcome there, no matter what dogma, religion, whatever they had, or no belief system. Everyone was welcomed. But
Mhm.
Spiritism was very big in the Casa, and we did a lot of Alan Kardec work. The early days with Arturo, when I did the prayers with him in the first current room on Sundays, I just started with the prayers before I did the current rooms.
Mm.
But I did a lot of the Gospel according to Alan Kardec. We used to open it on a certain page and take a lesson from it. So it was fabulous, really. And it always nailed whatever we needed to know as a group consciousness.
A lot of what they talked about in the main hall at first, when I first went there, it was seemed so strange to me. But once I became familiar with Spiritism, it all made sense because they were talking about Spiritist concepts, reincarnation and the law of cause and effect,
Yes.
all that stuff, um, faith and merit. Yeah, that's one of the first things that the guy, I think it was Arturo, the little guy, the
Yeah,
little guy that was in the main room sometimes in the early days, he would often talk about fe y merecimiento,
see,
faith and merit.
yes,
That's what often influenced your healing uh, with any healer, with any spiritual healing. God will not heal you of something that you have to go through because that would deprive you of the whole purpose of your incarnation. You know,
exactly.
uh,
We're on a mission. Yeah, we need to learn these lessons, and boy, are they hard
some of them can be
sometimes.
very brutal stuff. And the consequences of our actions are so important. I mean, they you really got to be careful what you do in life because it really matters what you do in life. You
Yeah,
know, good and bad, and you got to be
karma is
very
a
very careful.
boomerang.
Yeah.
Yeah, literally. But you've gone back since the medium left the Casa. And how did you feel about going back after, it was closed very briefly, but we couldn't travel. But when you came back, was it 2023?
Well, I went back in 2019.
Oh, yes, I
shortly
remember.
after shortly after the events with the medium, maybe
Hmm.
7 months, 8 months later, in September, I believe, was 2019. You were there at the time.
Yeah,
Uh, it was already quite different. There was it wasn't quite how it is right now. The shops were still kind of open. They were still kind of hanging on, hoping that things would come back. It was that sort
yeah.
of in between period. I believe the cafe was still open at the time.
Yeah, we were working 6 days a week, though. We
Yeah,
went back to working our butts off to try and
yeah.
make ends meet because the town was decompressing, is the word I would use.
Yeah, it had a huge impact. I mean, it was really a cataclysmic impact on that side of town. The other side is still kind of the same, but the
Yeah,
Casa side, it's a huge difference. So I did wonder when I went back in 2019, and even when I went back in 2024, like how is it going to be? Like, is it still going to work? Is everything
yes.
still going to be around? And of course, the thing you have to keep in mind, which I believe still to this day, is that the medium was an instrument of the spirits. He
Hmm.
was a sort of a cog in the wheel, but he's not the guy that's really running the place. He's not even the guy who really founded the place. This was all done by Dominatio and his contingent of spirits, and
Exactly.
they're still there because they until they reincarnate again at some point, they're still going to be there. They're there for a very long
They
time, and
ain't
they've
going
got.
nowhere. And if anything, the energy is really high. There's a portal that'll never close. And
Yeah,
it's very, very much multiplied right now. I mean, because the world is in a very strange place and the Casa energy is needed so much. There's a massive outpouring of love light from the portal of the Casa, and we can tune into that anywhere in the world, which is fantastic.
well,
You know,
I've continued to work with the spirits at home. Like that, I've continued ever since. Like the past almost 20 years, I've been working ever since 2006. I can summon them right now if I want. Like I could summon them at a moment's notice to work on the variety of things that I've ever asked for in my 20 years of experience at the Casa almost. So
yeah.
that's how that proves to me that they're going to be attached to me probably for the rest of this whole incarnation. You know, uh,
When we pass on into the next world, we will be working through the portal of the Casa.
yeah,
We will be helping
it's
when we pass on into the spirit world. We will be helpers too. We will be coming back to work through that portal because that's where the phalange is, the group of entities that we are, group consciousness, and it's a beautiful thought because I know we've had experience of people going out of their bodies and they go through the casa, people who have names put there or have been to the casa. That's their exit point on the planet to go through the portal in the casa up into the spiritual hospital over the casa and then onwards up into the celestial fields. Some people have rehabilitation because they haven't done quite exactly what they were supposed to do, which I'm sure I'll be in a process of rehabilitation for a while, but I'm not that pure yet, and I may have to reincarnate. Who knows? But they've certainly taught us so much, Sylvan. It was fabulous that we found Brazil, and that the medium said yes to his mission and that we learned and we're continuing to learn right now about the Casa energy.
Yeah. I mean, just like I said, despite the bumpiness of the road that has been the case for myself, there's no other way it could have gone for me. Like I really had to try going down this path. That I was just writing this down on my notes as I prepared for this talk. There's just no other way it could have gone for me. I needed to go down this path, and
Yes.
and it was going to happen, either way, just because, just for many reasons. So it's not an issue of, do I feel I regret anything? It's literally it's the way that it had to be, and for good or ill or whatever good or bad that happened or has happened or it will happen, it's my path. And I
Yes.
feel that anybody who goes down there, it's probably the same thing. It's just the way that they just end up there for whatever reason, and it's part of their path.
Yeah, and it's beautiful because it's almost like a reunion. I feel like we've all known each other in past lifetimes, and I've had experiences of that quite a few times where I have run up to people and said, "Welcome back," and they've said to me, "I've never been here before. This is my first time," and I'm like, "Okay." I've obviously had a consciousness moment with them or a God moment with them in some past life experience. So that was my way of being um welcoming them, to the Gaza energy and welcoming them home. It was like a homecoming, really. So obviously we have, and I always felt, I think we were communicating well after I got to know you as well because I was sending herbs. I was helping Adrian out as well. So I got to know you very well when you sent requests down because your prayers were answered eventually, and you were got put through the ringer a lot, but your faith was really strong, and that's something that really inspired me, and I'll never forget that because you were so tuned into the energy, and that gave me hope that that everybody would be healed in their own way. You were being healed in your way, which was a bit inconvenient, really, when he had to leave a job. About someone seems weird. But I get it. I understand it, and I think it's great that you understand, the work of the entities, which is a lot of people still don't know how they got healed, or they think they didn't get a miracle, or if they don't get something physical done, then there's no miracle. The miracle is that we are awoken. We're awake now, and we're still on the planet, and we're learning to love each other. That's our mission, and it's hard, because out here in the real world, and Abidjan was great to live in because we had a constant flow of people, but in the real world, it's quite challenging because people think you're batshit crazy that these unseen beings are
Yeah.
walloping into your jaw
You
and other
can't you
places.
can't tell everybody about it. That's one thing I learned the hard way. You cannot tell just anyone about this stuff. There's just a lot of people are just completely closed to it. They're blind to it. They don't believe in it. They're materialistic. Alan Kardec had to deal with that back in the day as well. I mean, he wrote
Yeah.
entire papers on that subject.
I know, and we think we're more guided now on keeping it zipped, particularly, with so much chaos in the world, people saying, "Oh, there is no God," and why would God do this and that? I understand. We're on a planet of atonement, really, and we're back here to learn these lessons that we didn't learn the first time, or the second, or the third. So a lesson will be repeated until it is learned, and that's why I love Spiritism because it is true. And we go up a notch every time we learn that lesson, and the lessons can be hard in the school of life.
I always describe spiritism as an explanation. It's the explanation, the best explanation I've ever encountered about how things work at the top level, in the big picture. It's the best
Mm.
explanation. I grew up, Roman Catholic, French Roman Catholic here in Canada, and this is the best, and it's very well written. It's very clear. It's very concise. It just puts it all. Kardec was a teacher, right? So he knows how to put. They chose their guy right. They chose the right guy for the job, to put it all down in a book, to explain to people how things really work. And it is, I mean, Jesus Christ, they say in Spiritism that Jesus spoke about the consoler. There would one day be a consoler that would be sent. And
Yes,
Spiritism says that it is the consoler. Spiritism is the consoler. It's the one that came to explain things clearly as opposed to using parables. Anyway,
yes.
so for me, that was
No,
one of the biggest gifts of the Casa.
yeah, and the gift as well that keeps on giving because we are always connected. Like I will always be in touch with you right through our lives now. We will always be part of something really special. And it's not like an ego thing either. It's just we are really part of this amazing group consciousness, and I think the Casa reunited us all. And there will be the next lifetimes we'll be probably together again, or in this lifetime, we have this really strong bond because we shared so many extraordinary miracles, um, and witnessed a lot of them. Not only ourselves, but I've just so many people. I used to give talks, and people would be telling me stories of like incredible healings, liver transplants and stuff that it really is out there,
Yeah.
and people say that's impossible because that liver transplant actually happened, and I'm not going to get into it now, but I mean the girl's from Sao Paulo. I don't know how wouldn't know where to start to get in touch with her or whether she'd like to talk about it, but certainly she did give a testimonial in the garden of the Casa, and there were just floods of tears because it was being translated into 5 different languages, and I was witnessing it. And her story is just impossible, for our small minds to, and it really happened, So the t-shirt, the blood, the stitches, no rejection drugs, even the doctors. There were 5 specialists in Sao Paulo who were just like, what? How did you buy liver on the internet?
Yeah, I heard,
This
I
is
heard that story.
impossible.
You must
Yeah.
have heard so many amazing stories over the years because you've been there for so long and you've spoken to so many people, of course, with the cafe and everything. You must have a whole trove of data on top of my own story, which is a bizarre one. But you've heard, I'm sure, so many things over the years.
Yeah, and I used to write for Friends of the Casa as well. I must have a look and see. It would be great if we could do that, maybe put in some stories on Abidjani connections, although not everybody's on the internet or even on YouTube. But we can work towards that because it's important for people to realize that there's help available. We're not alone, very much not alone, you know, and there are invisible people helping us.
Walking
Welcome to the
around.
club.
There's invisible people walking around. Do you get it, man? That was the best. That was the best moment.
Welcome to the club. I
It's
just
all
love it.
real. It's
It's
all
real.
real.
It really is. It's the real world,
It
even
is.
though it sounds mad.
It's the
Well,
other
that's what
side
we
of the
have
real
time
world.
for, actually, because we're just we're on time. I mean, that's just amazing. The story is beautiful, and I mean, you too have had extraordinary. I remember the wheelchair and MS, and I was thinking, oh my God, you're getting worse. But actually, they were healing you.
Yeah, apparently I was told that that happens with MS and stuff like that. It brings out it causes an attack, basically a massive attack, which is what happened, and
Hmm.
you knocks you right on your ass. And but then they work. You got to just keep going, and you eventually get out of it. But it was a rough ride, I gotta say. That was not a smooth trip. That 2017 trip.
No, I remember it. I remember seeing you and thinking, what happened to you? I thought you had an accident or something. And then when you told me the story, I was like, Oh my God, yeah, now I get it. Because you had to go back to the basics, and start from the beginning, which is you learn a lot of patience. I mean, that's what really struck me about it. I think you were teaching us patience as well because you said, "Oh, it will get better," but I have to go through all this pain, and suffering. But you really kind of took it on the chin like a real warrior. So that taught us all, well, Sylvain's there battling away, and you were an inspiration. Yeah, you are an inspiration,
Oh,
to this.
I could feel it getting better slowly. It was very, very slow, but after about a week or so, I could just push my chair. I didn't have to like sit in the chair and get pushed around. I was able to use my chair as a kind of a crutch, you know? And then eventually I was able to hang on to somebody else and not even have the chair. And eventually I was able to walk completely on. It was the dizziness that had to go away. It was a very strong, and also I was numb. My whole face was numb. My half my tongue was numb. So I went and had your burgers and I couldn't taste the burger. It tasted like sand. I lost 25 pounds that summer because of that. I lost 25 pounds because when you can't taste the food, you're like, why am I bothering eating?
Oh,
I can't, it tastes
God.
like sand, you
Oh
know?
my gosh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was wild.
Thank you for making us laugh too.
Yeah.
That's all we have time for, but we will be in touch again soon. And thank you for doing this podcast because if it makes a difference to one person, it's the job well done. And also, people will remember you from Abidjan when they see you. And Sylvan, I'm really honored to be able to talk to you and have a good time with you talking about healing, which can be pretty tricky, and
Yes.
painful, in your case. Okay, so thank you, and we'll big love to you all the way from the Casa family
Canada.
that are, yeah, Casa family, and we'll see you soon.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you.
Ciao.